Hey everyone, we have been working on our scripting to close more loans, do more deals, and bring in more money for about 18 years, and we're going to give it all to you right now.
Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your host from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the show. Chris and Jason here, Private Lenders Podcast. We're talking about our scripting secrets we have been developing using ourselves and with our team and with people in the mastermind group for a lot of years now. Because the reality is, it's really easy to get lazy in loan origination and start, somebody emails you a deal. Here's what's going on. Here are the numbers. And you just shoot back a quick loan quote. Here's how much we can lend. Here's the rate and points and stuff. And that is just, I know it's tempting. It's easy to be lazy like that, but you're not going to close enough deals that way. You don't give yourself a chance to sell, to build rapport, to show credibility. All of the key steps in sales, plus some of the tips and tricks that we've learned over all these years of originating private loans, we're going to break them down.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't work that way. You got to remember that part of this job is selling and sales. And I remember Chris and I both had different sales jobs early on in our career pre-HMB, and we both got a lot of value out of that. Anything related to, needs analysis or building rapport to start with, right? The needs analysis and then asking for the sale and going through the entire sales process. And let's be honest, the product of selling money is pretty easy compared to a lot of other products, right? People want money. You have money. The problem is if you present it the wrong way, people aren't going to buy your product because they're going to think you're too expensive. They're going to think that your leverage is too low, which it is on both. But if it's presented the right way, you just have such a higher conversion rate. So let's go through a little bit of the scripting stuff that we do. And I'm hoping that if you're watching this or you're listening, you're going to have some sort of an aha moment. Be like, oh man, that makes a lot of sense, because this is stuff that we do and it's second nature to us inside of our business. But we've trained obviously lots of partners and loan officers on doing this internally, along with a lot of members of the mastermind group. And it's really helped not only increase conversion rate, but being able to lend at lower leverages at higher terms. Most people, listen, if you're giving borrowers 100% LTV, like, you're going to win every deal. You just are, right? If you're getting 100% leverage from somebody and you don't need to bring any money to the table or little bit money to the table, maybe you're back ending term, fees, maybe you're rolling in interest, by the way, bad idea. That's a different conversation.
No, you're gonna win deals, but you're gonna lose money. So we can't do that.
That's right. And it's just a matter of time until that happened. And most people we talk to, within like year 3, they realize like, oh crap. And listen, it's scary up front to try to quote lower leverage than you're used to, because you're scared your good borrowers are going to go away and then you're not going to make that income from them. And I get it. But if you learn these tactics, you should be able to have a higher conversion rate and, quote deals with confidence. But a lot of this still comes down to the point, and this topic is about scripting. It's not about marketing, but you still need lead flow and marketing flow. So this doesn't replace this. What this replaces is having higher conversion rates and potentially doing the deals that you should be doing or the loan amounts that you want to do. So you're not scared after you write a loan of like, oh crap, like, hey, I wrote the loan. I'm happy I made some money. Hopefully this guy pays me because I gave him high leverage. So we start out, and I mean, go look at, and I haven't looked at, researched call scripts in forever, but I'm willing to bet that if you Google sales call scripts, it's going to go through the process of what I said earlier about, hey, you got to build rapport with somebody. Then you got to do a needs analysis. You got to figure out what they want. If you don't know what they're trying to accomplish, you don't ask those questions up front, you'll never be able to overcome their objections. Their objections are like, I don't want to put that much money down. Their objections are, I don't want to pay that many fees. And so you have to go through all that stuff up front. So the easiest way, like, to build rapport is relate yourself, tell them something about your company and then relate yourself to the project so they know that you're a local lender. You're not a national California-based lender who's doing a deal on the East Coast, right? Borrowers don't want to deal with robots. They don't want to deal with national lenders. They want to deal with localized people, as long as you can build a rapport with them. So the building rapport phase is pretty easy. It's like, hey, this is Jason at Hard Money Bankers. How can I help you? Hey, Jason, I want to know what your rates are. That's the first question everybody asks. That's the only question to ask. They don't really that's not the most important thing to them, even though that's what you think the most important thing is to them. Just because they ask that, that's the only thing that. What else are they going to ask up front? Hey, what are your rates? So they start with that and be like, hey, no problem. We have a few different loan programs. Happy to see, what fits you best. Do you have a property under contract? And it's like, yeah, I got a property on, 123 Main Street. I just looked at it today. I think I'm going to get it under contract. And we'll get back to the closing time frame here in a second. And it's like, that's great. I actually know that area. I went to high school around there, or my parents live around there, or I have a friend that lives around there, or we did a loan on that street. And if you have nothing in common with that, put it into freaking Google Maps while you're talking to them on the phone and be like, oh yeah, I know where that is. It's on the corner of First Street and Main Street, right? And it's like, yeah, Jason knows where the property is, right? And I didn't tell that, all I did was go on Google, and I know where the property is because I looked on it on a map, right? So however you can to relate yourself to the property, the better. So that's building rapport. Oh, this guy's a local lender. He gets me. He understands me. He knows that area. So the next part is, tell me a little bit about what you're looking to do with this project. What's your purchase price? What's your construction cost? When do you need to close by? What's your experience level, right? And this is conversational. This isn't like, hey, I gotta be a robot and checklist all these items. Like, this is conversational that you have to have with them. And some things you don't even need to ask questions because they give you the answers as you're talking to them, right? Hey, have you ever done a project like this before? No, this is my first fix and flip, but I own like 10 rental properties. Oh, wow, 10 rental properties. That's great. Yeah, typically I buy some properties and and then I refinance them with DSCR lenders. Great. That means the borrower has good credit. You don't even have to ask that question, right? They're not going to get a DSCR loan if they don't have good credit. Usually you can figure out kind of how much cash they have. Like, hey, how much money are you used to putting down on some of these projects? Well, the DSCR lenders, they're strict. They make me put down 30%. Great. They're used to having some money in that. Point being is you got to do a needs analysis of figuring out what they want, learn a little bit about them, because you need that. If you don't do that up front, you can't overcome their objections. And overcoming the objections is the hard part, right? So then they'll be like, okay, well, hey, listen. So, how much you looking on this particular project, right? That's usually, the next type of question. Let's say they told you they bought it for $200,000 and it needs $60,000 in work, right? So 200 plus 60 is $260,000 cost. 200 purchase, $60,000 construction. How much are you looking on this? Well, I'm kind of looking just for, whatever you can lend me, or the highest amount, something like that. It's like, yep, I get it. I'm going to have to, pull some comps. Let me see what we can lend on that area. I want to familiarize myself with it. I know that area, but I want to familiarize myself a little bit. Like, if we could lend, I don't know, I'm just going to throw out a number here. If we could lend, $220,000 total on this project, could you make that work? The way that what ends up being is that's going to be 160 towards your purchase, 60 towards the construction, right? So 220, 220 loan amount. I didn't go extreme enough. Let me start that part over. Let me rephrase that a little bit, because usually we try to price anchor, which we'll talk about here in a second. So we try to do, in essence, like a low ball number just to see where their head is. And my math didn't work in my head quick enough on that. So, hey, let's say we could do a loan of $200,000, $180,000. That'd be 120 towards the purchase, 60 towards the construction. Is that something that you could do? And then they'll come back and be like, oh, so 180 loan and it's a 200 purchase and a 60 construction. So 180 at 260. And be like, yeah, is that something you can make work? And then typically they're like, yeah, I was looking for a little bit higher, cool. Like, what kind of, how much cash could you put into this deal then? And then they'd be like, well, I've got 40 grand I could put in, is that enough? Be like, well, we probably need a little bit more, could you do 60, right? And in essence, it's just kind of a negotiation game, right? You start low, you work your way high, and you figure out you figure out their threshold of where they're comfortable with and what you think they're going to accept, type of thing, right? And if they say, well, I'm only looking for 100% finance, and be like, hey, listen, I get it. I'd like to get you the highest loan amount possible. Unfortunately, like I can't do 100%. What's the most you could put in if you need to, right? Like that's typically a good rebut. And they're like, I only have 20 grand. If they only have 20 grand and they're buying a property for 200 and need 60 grand in work, like there's nothing you can do. They're just not. They don't have enough cash in that deal. So you'd be like, hey, listen, I'll be honest with you. Like, I don't want to waste your time. Unfortunately, $20,000 isn't going to be enough. Could you come up with 60? Nah, I only have 20. Do you have a cash partner that you potentially, partner with on this deal? Nah, not really. Do you have any other free and clear real estate? You go down that road. Because if they only have 20, there's really nothing you can do anyways. And keep in mind, I haven't pulled comps. I haven't looked at the property. I haven't done anything. This is just verbal. If the numbers don't work off the borrower's numbers, they're certainly not going to work off your numbers that are going to be more conservative. So this is the game that we play with borrowers on the phone. And keep in mind, this is only a 3 or 4 minute conversation. This isn't a 20-minute thing. It's a few minute conversation. You build the rapport, you figure out needs analysis. And then as you can see, I'm throwing out numbers. They're rebutting them like, hey, I want to do this. I want to do that. And one of the most important things you have to ask for is the timeline of closing. When's your closing date? Because everything's always got to be a rush, right? In essence, it's, hey, well, I'm not closing until the end of the month. We're like, oh, shoot. Okay. Yeah, we're going to have to move quick, but we'll get that thing done for you. Right. Or like I need to close Friday. Be like, oh, crap. Okay. If that's the case, we really need to move quick. I'm going to have to really get a commitment from you by the end of the day in order to hit that closing date type of thing. But you need to know that urgency so you can use that to your advantage. And, in essence, it's like, hey, listen, like you got to close soon. Like this is where we're going to need to be at, cash to close. So hopefully everybody's following that. But, and I know that example I botched up a little bit, but in essence, I usually like to start around a 40% cash to close, 40 to 50% cash to close based off our loan amount, based off the cost. So for instance, if somebody's buying a property for 200 and needs 60 grand in work, typically we'll try to come in around, 180 and then they need 100. Or I'm sorry, 180 and then they need, God dang it. Why am I doing this on the fly? I'm sorry, 180 and then we come in a loan at 180, they would need 90 cash to close because 90 is about 50% of 180, or it is 50% of 180, right? So if we're going to lend like 100, we want them to bring 50 grand to the table, right? That's usually where we start at. And then they usually push back a little bit and we end up being, I don't know, portfolio average is probably like 35-ish, 40% based on our loan amount, right? So for every 100 we lend, they're probably bringing 40 grand to the table, give or take. So, but we start low. And again, like Chris started off with, this can't be done over email. This can't be done over text. If I email this to somebody, they're going to say F you, or they're not going to respond just like that. And they're going to get angry and they're mad because you're getting lowballed. But if you heard the way I described this is like, yeah, let me see what I can do. Obviously, I might not know the area that well yet. Might be an area I'm not really, I fully know. I got to pull comps. I got to do whatever, right? Like you use that as kind of a crutch. I got to pull some comps, but let me see what I can do. If we were able to come in around 180, is that something you can make work? And then work your way up from that.
All right. That was a lot of scripting information and a lot of trial and error from over the years. So I just want to emphasize a couple things for the audience here. So remember to build rapport. Again, like you just can't do this on email. And we even have to work with our own team on this. And these guys are veterans, but it's easy to slip into certain habits and to get lazy and like have some back and forth on email about here's how much I can lend you. No, give me more. It's like, it's just stupid. Get on the phone, have a conversation, start with the rapport, relate yourself to the property, let them know you've done a bunch of loans in this area over the years. You had a project near there, all that, right? Just standard sales stuff, build rapport, see what they're looking to do, get the conversation going. And remember, you're going to talk numbers on this call. That's the purpose of this call. You don't need to just talk about the project and then go do a bunch of due diligence and get back to them with a loan quote. Yes, you'll do that later. You'll do your due diligence later. You're not committing. You're just talking numbers, right? That's something we've been coaching our team on forever, to see where their head's at. And remember, price anchoring. That's a sales term. But in our world, it's basically loan amount anchoring or cash to close anchoring, just so you can plant in their mind that we're going to come in around this loan amount, around this 200K, and you're going to need 80K cash to close, give or take. Does that work? And just see where it is, see what they're saying. Oftentimes, especially brokers, but we don't have to dive into the broker topic now. Oftentimes, borrowers, just like they're trained to ask what the rate is, they're trained to be like, I want to borrow the most I can. They're trained to think that they are supposed to do that, when in actuality, it's not the case. And that often happens too in refinance situations. So we do bridge loan, cash out refis on properties that are owned free and clear all the time. We have to be careful. We have to be careful what they're using the money for. All that stuff. They inherently have some more risk because we don't know if they're reselling or not. They often say they are, but then they're like end up in some refinance process. But anyway, when the conversation starts, it starts with a lot of, oh yeah, I own this rental property free and clear worth 300K and just trying to see how much cash out I can take. And then you have the conversation. Okay, cool. No, we can definitely take a look at that. Go through the same script. Oh, it's in Silver Spring, Maryland. Oh, great. Yeah, no. Jason and I grew up one town over. We're from Rockville. We know this area well. We have done a flip of our own a bunch of years ago on Bonifant Road, right? And then see what they actually need in their pocket. Oh, yeah, I'm looking to put down a down payment on this retail property that I'm buying in 2 months. Oh, cool. How much cash in hand do you need? I plan to put down 100K. Oh, all right. So all of a sudden they don't need to borrow the max cash out. You're kind of backing into what they do need. Maybe, you need 100K cash in hand on this 300K as is value property. All right. Maybe we can get away with a loan amount of 120 or 125. Build in some payments, fees, everything else. Okay, cool. They're just kind of trained to ask for the max possible, even if they don't necessarily need it. And through conversation, you can kind of pull out what it is. And then after you have, whether it's a, fix and flip situation, cash out refi, you have that conversation, you anchor some of these numbers in their head of like, here's about where it's going to come out. I'm not 100% sure. Going to have to pull some comps, take a look at the situation, and I'll get back to you. But first, see if they're going to verbally agree to the numbers based on their numbers. And that's what a lot of people who lend in multiple states or who have more of an institutional like process don't totally understand. They don't know how to have a conversation about numbers that are pretty close to what they're going to be on call number one. Like some people are so far out of underwriting process that they'll be like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can, whatever the appraisal comes in, we can lend you 85% of that. What the appraisal is going to be, who knows? It's like, no. Let's use your numbers and have a real conversation about their scenario. Yeah. That's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about your loan process. They're thinking about their deal, right? And so then later, you firm it up, right? You get a verbal yes, and then you go pull your comps, maybe do an inspection, issue a term sheet according to the numbers that you talked about. If everything is the way it was during the conversation, then great. Oftentimes it is. And then sometimes if something's way off, they're like, yeah, my ARV's 600 and the neighborhood's clearly 450. Okay, obviously then things are going to change, but that's usually not the case, right?
Yeah, let me add one thing to that too. Like, obviously, you got to get off that phone knowing, number one, what their motivation is. Number two, the max cash to close they could put in if needed, right? So you have that in place. And this is all verbal. None of this is put in writing. Like, we don't need to send any of this out. Like, the biggest mistake is they'll be like, oh, yeah, that, I could see that working. Can you put that on paper? And then in essence, it's like, yeah, I mean, in due time, we will do a formal term sheet with you. I do want to make sure, I do got to double check the numbers, just make sure we're good on this. And then we'll reach back out and we'll firm things up. Oh yeah, no problem. Right. Because the last thing, like our close rate based off term sheets outstanding is like 50%. Like it takes time to put term sheets together. Right. And you're not just handing them out just to hand them out. So you want to make sure they have that ability to do so. And like what Chris said, we firm up the numbers and two things either happen. Either the numbers are way off or the numbers are off or the numbers work. And if the numbers work, give them a call back, be like, hey, listen, I pulled up everything. I think we should be, it looks like we're going to be good on this. I know we had to close Friday, so I expedited this so we can close immediately. But that being said, like, if we're going to do this, like, honestly, I got to get everything done and, firmed up and get title ordered and the insurance ordered and my inspection ordered by the end of the day. Is that something you can make happen? Like, I'm good with the numbers that we talked about. We could do a 180 loan. You're going to need $100,000, cash to close, based on what we just talked about. The numbers work. If you want to do it, let me know and we can proceed, but we do got to move quick. Right. And then they'll be like, yeah. And then they'll be like, let's say they say, yes, we can do it. Before you put that term sheet together, you need one more thing from them, which is important. Make them send the ratified contract to you, right? You need to give them something of work to show, like, because keep in mind, they haven't filled out a loan application. They haven't done any of these things. You don't need them to do anything, but you need something to show that, like, they're in. So they'll send you the purchase, and I'll usually be like, hey, can you just do me a favor? Shoot me over the purchase contract real quick, because then I know the actual borrower name, your actual purchase price, who the title company is, your earnest money deposit. I'll have all your information, all your realtor information, and then I can put together the final term sheet, and we'll get that back as soon as possible, right? They send that over. We send the term sheet. We email the term sheet back, be like, hey, per our conversation, these are all the documents that we need. Can you please get this to me, later today by 5 p.m. today or whatever? And then I'll send them a text and say, hey, I just sent you it. As promised, please try to get this to me by 5 p.m. I really want to prioritize this. And I can't do anything until the term sheet's signed and the inspection fee is paid, right? And then on the other side, let's say, the numbers are way out of whack. You go back to them and say, hey, honestly, I looked at the numbers. I don't think this is going to be a great fit for us, unfortunately. Like, I'd love to help. I'm just not sure it's going to work, right? Because, like, people don't like to get turned down either, right? Like, people are weird about that, right? You rather you turn them down than they turn you down psychologically, right? So it's like, I don't know if the numbers are going to work based on what we discussed earlier. Like, I'd love to help. I just don't think I can make this work. Like, oh, really? Why? I just don't, I just don't see the ARV you're looking at. I mean, it depends on the situation, right? You don't want to insult people or tell them that they don't know how to ARV, or I don't like telling people, like, oh, your credit sucks, or your bad experience, or I don't trust you. Like, you try to, ease that conversation so there's no bad blood, but be like, hey, listen, like, it seems like a good project and I think you're going to do well. I can't fully wrap my brain around the numbers on this. I don't see us making this deal work, or making this project work, unless the loan amount was 160 instead of 180. So you're going to need $20,000 more. I know. I don't know if it's going to, I get it. Like, it's more than you wanted to put up. Happy to help if you can make it work. Type of thing. And then you see where that conversation goes, right? And if it's, sometimes like, yeah, it's a little bit more than I want to put up, but I got to close quickly, so we'll do it. Like, that might be something that happens, and that's great. Or somebody will be like, yeah, let me see what else is out there. I'll shop around. And then I'll be like, hey, listen, you should do that. Try to get someone that might be less cash to close. Just keep in mind, you have to close Friday, right? You only have 4 days. So, like, it's going to have to be a private lender. Make sure if you get in touch with somebody, ask them if they're using their own money and they can close on time. Because the last thing you want to do is lose that deposit that you potentially put on, right? So then you, in essence, help them find a better solution.
All right, everyone, that is the pod for today. I hope you got some good value that allows you to close more deals per leads. That's the goal here. So if you haven't done so already, come check us out at hardmoneymastermind.com, and we'll see you here next time on the podcast.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.